Alrighty guys and girls, how we doing? Last one of our profession quick looks. Well, maybe not necessarily the last, we might do cooking as well, but at least of the primary professions, we have engineering today. Now, engineering, that class that is typically sort of very gadget, very gizmo orientated, often very advantageous for heavy PvPers, but not necessarily the best profession for goal making, but let's see what it has to offer in Shadowlands. So first and foremost, you're going to be crafting some parts that these will then be useful for crafting further on down the line. Realistically, these are just sort of cannon fodder to get you your first few skill points. Going to make your bolts, going to use lace strike ore. You're going to make some polishing abrasive, which comes from the stone. You will notice very quickly that if you want to progress with engineering quickly and effectively, you're going to need a lot of ore and you're going to need a lot of stone. So ideally makes sense to also be a miner unless you're willing to dump a lot of money to buy these materials off the auction house. Let's look at some of the things that you can pick up quite quickly on though. You've got the belt attachments. Most of the time engineers have some way to customize their own gear. Your belt attachments do a few different things. You've got basically the damage Retaliator is basically like giving you a thorns buff. He's going to spin some blades around you and anybody who attacks you is going to take some damage. You have the dimensional shifter, which is quite a cool one, simply turning you invisible when out of combat. I'm sure there's some people with some creative minds that can use this to their advantage, most definitely. Then you have the Electro Jump, giving classes that don't naturally have a blink ability a blink. So once again, I'm sure that there's some people that have some creative uses for these abilities. Materials wise, you'll notice that obviously the bolts that we craft early on are going to be used. Worm-fed gear assemblies is a more advanced item that we craft that is then used further on. But there's tie-ins with both enchanting, there's tie-ins with leatherworking, there's tie-ins with tailoring in terms of the materials that are used, and equally jewel crafting. You'll see a lot of the other professions items needed to make these engineering gear. So it's almost impossible to be totally self-sufficient when it comes to engineering. You're going to have to be buying a few things off the auction house unless you have that team of alts that have got all of the professions leveled up as well. Engineers have the optional reagents like everybody else. Crafters Mark II, one thing to note is it does require you to be revered with the avowed. Not going to be too difficult to get to revered. You'll probably get honoured pretty quickly, and then revered is just a small grind away. But realistically, engineers themselves don't make much gear, so getting access to these crafters marks is not as essential as it is with some other classes. You've got the bombs, very PvP orientated once again. You make basic nutcracker grenades using a few bits of ore and some pre-crafted materials. You then can use those nutcracker grenades to craft yourself some additional bombs that are going to do some more damage. Devices, we get our Wormhole Generator. We have a Wormhole Generator in every expansion, it seems. You do have to be honoured with the Undying Army, but luckily it's only honoured. That's not going to take you too long. Realistically, the first time you go through Moldraxxus, you're probably almost going to hit honoured. If you don't, as soon as you ding 60, you get back there, do a couple of world quests, and I imagine you'll be honoured. Not going to be too difficult to get hold of this. In terms of selling this, obviously it is restricted to requiring you to be an engineer to use it, so that does limit your market somewhat. But toy collectors out there are always going to want these. Have one crafted, have it on the auction house, you'll be good to go. Gravimetric Scrambler cannon just causes a bit of chaos throwing things about. It's just a cool little toy to use, but realistically kind of expensive. You've got enchanting materials needed, you've got a lot of ore, you're then going to be using more ore to make the bolts along with a lot of stone. You sense a pattern here, very heavy requirements on mining. You've got some boots as well, which then start using some cloth. And then shout out to any Ghostbusters fans out there, you have the soul trap, which will banish any enemy that steps on it, with of course reduced effectiveness against players. Goggles, I think unfortunately, goggles either need quite a drastic rework, but you can kind of tell that they're definitely not finished with engineering. They're still using placeholder materials, for example. I get the feeling I might have to do this video twice if they make any significant changes. Biggest issue I think with the goggles as it stands right now is their item level. It requires you to be level 60, but they're only item level 151, which as it currently stands on the beta is, I believe that's even less than heroic dungeons. So these either need a level boost or a level requirement reduction before they're really sort of advantageous. Equally, one thing I did think of is you might actually use a novice crafter's mark on these to actually bring the stats down to be able to allow you to use them as you level. If you bring the level requirement down to 50, you might actually sell a fair few of these, if I'm honest. So goggles, there's 4 sets of goggles, 1 for each class. You've got agility, you've got cloth, you've got leather, and you've got plate, with obviously their respective stats on there. The parts we kind of covered a little bit already. You just craft these simply to be able to craft further things. There's nothing too fantastic about those. The only thing you might find is you might be able to throw some of these up on the auction house and make a little bit of profit, depending on how much the price of the ore fluctuates. Scopes were a cool one. Scopes give anybody that uses any ranged weapons to get either a nice big boost of haste. 397 haste for 12 seconds is quite a nice chunk of haste. Certainly when characters are fresh and characters are new, this is going to be quite a boost, and there's equally one that gives critical strike as well. At the moment we only get to make one weapon. We get to make a gun. Equally, once I feel this is going to be rebalanced as well before it goes live. Only requires level 50, but it does have an item level of 100, whereas most other stuff has been rebalanced to be item level 87, so there's maybe a little bit of work still to do with this. And then finally we have the pet, the companion that you're able to create. These will always sell really nicely, but one thing to note that might annoy a few engineers is this here. You need to be exalted with the Ascended before you get access to this one, so expect to do a little bit of grinding. Disappointing to see that there's no mount implemented at the moment. Earlier in the beta there was also some brand new gliders which appear to have been removed as it currently stands, so maybe Blizzard are doing some tweaking in-house before we get an update. If there's any big updates, guys, I will let you know, but I'll leave it there for today. I've been Manthius, hope this has been helpful. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.